Congressman Jimmy Panetta. And just a little bit about Jimmy's background and the format. He'll talk probably roughly for 45 minutes, and then we'll have some Q&A for about 15 minutes. And then I promise to get him out of here by 2, okay? So if you ask questions, let's try to just do one question and move on so everybody gets a chance. So Jimmy is the son of former Defense Secretary Leon Panetta, a long-time Californian. Jimmy attended high school in Carmel, California. Then he went on to attend UC Davis, where he received a bachelor's degree in international affairs. From there, he went on to UC Davis, where he got his law degree. And after finishing law school, he went and worked in the district attorney's offices of Alameda and Monterey counties. Okay. Along with that, if that wasn't enough, Jimmy joined the Naval Reserves, and he became a intelligence officer. And as part of Operation Enduring Freedom, he served a tour in Afghanistan working with special forces. And because of his service there, he was awarded the Bronze Star. Thank you for that, Jimmy. I'd like to hear that over a beer sometime. In 2016, Jimmy decided to go ahead and run as a Democratic candidate for the 20th Congressional District. He won that election by 71% of the vote. And then from redistricting, he then was elected and is serving in the 19th Congressional District. And I guess you'll talk about that, how that spans geographically. He's currently serving his 5th term in Congress. He currently serves on the House Ways and Means Committee, the Budget Committee, plus he's the Chief Deputy Whip of the 119th Congress. During his time in Congress, Representative Panetta has fought for affordable housing, immigration reform, protecting our coastlines, our environment, access to health care, and he has been a champion for the farming industry and the workers, amongst many other things. And I know we have a lot of veterans here. He's also been heavily involved with protecting veterans' rights and benefits, and along with their families. We'd like to thank Congressman Panetta for taking the time out of your busy schedule to come and talk to us today. We really appreciate it. We are honored, and we want to thank you for your service to our country and our community. Please join me in welcoming Congressman Jimmy Panetta. Thank you. I think this one's live.
Oh. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me without the mic? Doesn't matter. I was, like I said, a former prosecutor, so I'm used to speaking up to people who can't hear. No, I'm kidding. Good. Is this okay? Is this better? Okay, great. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for this opportunity to come say hello to a group that, to be honest with you, I don't normally get in front of, considering the district and the makeup. But it's always an honor to see you and to be here and to kind of talk about the 19th Congressional District, which I'm going to be happy to talk about, and also what's going on and maybe what's not going on in the United States Congress right now. It is an interesting time, to say the least, to be a U.S. representative in the 119th Congress. It's funny, I normally don't mention him, as you can imagine, but considering it was part of the introduction, there's no way in hell I can talk about my job with my father, who served in this position for 16 years before he went on to other things. And the difference in environment, atmosphere, politics, and policies, obviously, okay, so do that one? Okay. The difference is something like no other, in the sense back when he served, they actually kind of let the people and policies drive their work. And unfortunately, what we've seen, it's just become very, very political in more ways than one, driving sort of the outcomes at this point. Nevertheless, and I hope you'll see after my remarks, that there are members of Congress on both sides of the aisle, Democrats and Republicans, who actually understand why we're there, understand that we are servants of the people, and that our job is to represent the people of our districts by getting stuff done. I cannot stress that enough. Now, I proudly represent the 19th Congressional District. What is the 19th Congressional District? It stretches with the northernmost part, and in the handout that I think Alyssa, who runs my San Jose office, there's a map in there. It doesn't do it service, but at least it tries to explain it. The most northern point of the 19th Congressional District is Lake Cunningham, Calabunga, Raging Waters, that area. That's the most northern point. It then goes down, sweeps down through South San Jose. I'll just go through the neighborhoods briefly. Evergreen, into Silver Creek, Edenvale, Blossom Valley, Almaden Valley, Coyote Valley. Sort of that kind of southern South San Jose. Doesn't stop there, though. Goes up over the hill into Santa Cruz, has all of Santa Cruz County except Watsonville. That got gerrymandered out. And we can talk about that. Then down the coastline all the way to Cambria. You hit Cambria, you then take a hard turn east and go all the way out to the border with Kern County and San Luis Obispo County, with Atascadero being the most southern town. So, as I say, it's not a San Jose district, it's not a Santa Cruz district, it's not a Monterey district, it's not a northern San Luis Obispo County district, it's an all of the above district. It's very, very diverse in more ways than one, geographically, politically, ethnically, socioeconomically. As I like to remind people in San Jose, you are in the same congressional district as the largest cattlemen's association in California that's down there in Paso Robles. And as I kind of sum it up, in our district, we have semiconductor chips and we have cow chips. It is a big district. It's a diverse district, but if you live in the 19th Congressional District, you do live in the most beautiful congressional district, in my opinion. Because anybody with that stretch of coastline going from Big Basin all the way down to Hearst Castle and San Simeon, you just can't beat it nationally. And although my colleagues will disagree with me, understandably so, they got to stand up for their districts, behind closed doors, they agree with me, definitely. It is so big, though, that I make sure, and it's kind of the way I do things, that our constituents are our number one priority. So in no way in heck would I ever expect the constituents of South San Jose to have to drive up over 17 to go to my office that was there originally at the Civic Center there, at the Civic Building there on Ocean Street. And so I'm probably one of the few congressional members that has 4 district offices: Paso Robles, Monterey, Santa Cruz, and right here at 841 Blossom Hill Road in San Jose. Alyssa Garcia Marquez standing in the back there. She runs that office with a new person we hired, Alice Yu, who's there, and they do an excellent job representing not just me when I'm not here, but also serving our constituents. And so, you know, as I look at this job, that really is kind of, being a Congress member, as I look at it, there's kind of 3 legs to that stool, okay? There's 3 legs. There's one, basically, you know, what we should be doing, passing federal legislation that represents and supports our district. I believe we'll continue to work on that and do that, especially in a couple areas that I'll talk about in the area. So 1, legislation. 2, federal funding. Making sure the power of the purse, we get our fair share here in the 19th Congressional District. And so just to kind of let you know some of the things that I've done just for the South San Jose alone, I've got $500,000 for Blossom Hill Senior Housing Project there, the new project on Blossom Hill. Rue Ferrari, working with Mayor Matt Mahan on both of these projects, working with Mayor Matt Mahan to get that Rue Ferrari emergency interim housing there right off 101, get them $1 million so that they could build more units in that area. Coyote Valley Open Space Preserve, making an accessible trail, got them $800,000. Lake Cunningham Park Revitalization, got them $850,000, working with Councilman Candelas. Some of the things that we put in for this year's budget, There's a pedestrian bridge there in the Yerba Buena neighborhood that's been out because of the flooding that happened a couple years ago. They need that rebuilt. We're putting in a request for $2 million. Actually, they've determined the numbers. We just got to pass a budget, another issue we'll talk about. $2 million for that. Guadalupe River Trail, construction from Branham to Chenoweth, $1 million. Ending sideshows in San Jose, giving the police department $500,000. So it helped them in that effort. And the Marshall Cottle Improvement Project, the Marshall Cottle Park there, getting them $250,000. Look, just things like this, little things like this, is really, I believe, our responsibility to make sure the power of the purse is felt right here in South San Jose. So like I said, legislation, federal funding, and casework. Casework. Making sure the freaking government works for you. What I mean by that, you know as well as I do, is sometimes when you call those 1-800 numbers, basically, you know what happened. Nobody picks up, or you're on hold for 3 hours or more. And so I believe my job is to make those people answer the phones for you. Because if they don't answer the phones for you, they sure as hell better answer it for a Congress member. And so if you have a problem with immigration, you have a problem basically bringing someone here, if you have a problem with Social Security, with Medicare, with your veterans benefits, with the IRS, please know you can call my office. I cannot stress that enough. And we will be there to make sure we take your case and we push the bureaucracy to do their job for you. Now, of course, I do not promise getting the outcome that you want, but I do promise that we will push to get you an outcome, because that's the least that the federal government can do for you. I firmly believe that that is the #1 job of a federal representative. I say that because it can actually have an impact on people's lives. People often ask me, why did you get into this job? Trust me, growing up as a kid down in Carmel Valley, California, with 2 older brothers that kicked the crap out of me, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And my parents did an excellent job, not really talking about politics or my father's job. My mother was his his district director, volunteer district director for the 16 years that he was in the representative's office there. And so obviously I saw them work very hard, but they never really engaged with us on that stuff. They wanted us to have our own lives. It wasn't until I got outside the house, and even to this day, people come up to me and they don't talk about my father's work as CIA director or SecDef or OMB or chief of staff or any legislation that he passed. What they make sure to tell me 30, 40 years later is that they had a problem with their Social Security. Nobody was picking up the phone. They called their Congress member's office, and they got a solution to that issue. That's what they remember. That's what they tell the son of a Congress member 40 years later. And so to me, when people come up to me now and say, hey, I called your office, and I had a problem with an immigration issue bringing a loved one here, or even to the smallest thing of like they forgot their passport, and their passport expired, and they're going on a trip literally the next day, and we get them an emergency meeting to get them a passport and get them on their way. These are the things people remember, because you've got to affect people's lives, and you can just by making government work. Now, trust me, I know you're looking at me going, government working? I turn on the TV these days, and I see the dysfunction, the divisiveness. I see decisions being made that create a tremendous amount of uncertainty all across our country and even internationally. How can you say the government is working? I get it. I get it. And it reminds me of a joke I heard in my Italian household growing up. And it's about this Italian mama's boy. Called them Mamonis, what they're called. And this Mamoni was having a hard time keeping a girlfriend. So it's so hard that he goes and sees a psychologist. And the psychologist says, what's going on? Mamoni says, well, look, every time I bring home a girl, my Italian overbearing mother, I'm Italian, I can say this, my Italian overbearing mother just doesn't like her, has a hard time with my girlfriends. The psychologist thinks about it and says, well, look, why don't you then just go out and get a young lady that's similar to your mother? Okay. So Mamoni goes out, finds this wonderful young lady, brings her home. Everything's not bad. Something's a little bit off. He has to go back to the psych. He talks to the shrink and he says, you know what? I found this wonderful, wonderful young lady, and she's just like my mother. Talks like my mother. She cooks like my mother. She even looks like my mother. And my mother loves her. And the doc says, well, that's great. What's wrong? He says, well, now my dad can't stand her. Look, this is kind of what we're dealing with in Washington, D.C. You got the Republicans acting like the dad, the Democrats are acting like the mother, and the people are left confused by what the heck's going on by some of these decisions. And so it makes it very, very difficult, and people realize it's more than a joke. More than a joke. People start questioning the future of our democracy, to be honest with you. When they see the institutions fighting and failing, they start to question our future. I don't know if you're familiar with David Brooks. He's a New York Times op-ed writer. And 2 weeks ago, he wrote this op-ed, just kind of share it with you. But the title is, Why More People in the World Are Feeling Hopeful. And then in quotes, he says, except us. Except us. And some of the things he said, look, he says, nations with the highest standards of living are seeing the greatest decline in well-being. And although the U.S.'s well-being is still the highest, its trends on hope are not good. They're declining. He says there's sort of a disconnect between our economic health and our social health. He says many countries don't do well economically, but they do very well socially and spiritually. He says countries with rising living standards have strong traditional social arrangement and value systems. And if they value economic gain, that can be done at the expense of their meaning. It can be done at the expense of our communities. And he summed it up by saying, Americans have become so obsessed with economic success that we've neglected the social and oral conditions that undergird human flourishing. He says the prevailing values of worship, he said the prevailing value that worship individual choice, those undermine the core commitments that precede choice. Our love of family, neighborhood, community, country, and the truth. That is why this type of group that's willing to come together and be reminded of what we stand for as a community is so important now more than ever. Because that sort of leadership at this point, what we're seeing, not necessarily going to be from the top down, it's going to continue to be from the bottom up. It's going to continue to be from your voices, from your efforts, from your will to get together and speak out going forward. That is what our values are about. It's about what you stand for as a community. Because right now, it just seems that our politics are just not working that well at the top. And as I mentioned in my opening remarks, partisanship is really pervading our policy making. And policy is being driven by politics and personality, not by the people that are affected by our work. We saw this in the last few months before our August break, where really all of the congressional bandwidth went towards the reconciliation law, the one big beautiful bill, the OBBB, probably the worst named bill in congressional history. And don't get me wrong, we had ours with the Inflation Reduction Act. Talk about a bad name. That was probably the second worst bill, but this bill is the worst named bill, I think. It's just a little much. And as I try to describe this bill, which I'm sure many of you heard about, it's, there's the good, the bad, and the ugly parts of it. Well, there's some good parts to this bill. And look, I didn't vote for it. I didn't vote for it mainly because it was a purely partisan bill. That's not how I like to do things. And if you want long-lasting legislation, both sides have to come to the table, and you have to work through the difficulties and the disagreements to get to a compromise. But with reconciliation, you don't need to do that. It's a one-time thing, at least one time a term, 2 times a term, 1 time a year, that the majority party can do it when it comes to economics and budget spending. within a 10-year window. You can do it. What I mean by that is you still have to have a majority in the House, but in the Senate, as you know, it takes 60 votes to get past the filibuster. For reconciliation, it's no longer 60, it's just a simple majority. So when you have control of the House, the Senate, and the White House, you can put a reconciliation package through. I get it. And unfortunately, it's a partisan process. It didn't always used to be like this. Back when they balanced the budget, back in the early 90s, it was a bipartisan process. Now it's become a partisan process to unfortunately kind of shove big bills through. That's what you saw with this one. Now, that was the main reason why I didn't vote for it, because not once did the majority come to the minority and say, hey, we'd like to get your input on this and negotiate with you and see where we can work together. Not once, unfortunately. And so they really just kind of rammed it through without any input from us. And so that was kind of the foundation of how I looked at this bill, unfortunately. Now, look, there's some good things in it. It brings some permanency to the individual tax code with their individual tax brackets. It deals with the estate tax exemptions. Seniors 65 or older get a $6,000 deduction if you make less than $75,000 this year, but that's only till 2029. There's some dependent care exemptions. There's a child tax credit. You get a mortgage deduction tax credit. State and local taxes, real big for us. As you know, the 2017 tax bill basically capped that at $10,000. You cannot get any more of a deduction beyond $10,000. This bill made it $40,000 for income up to $500,000, but that only lasts till 2029. But look, it was better than the $10,000 cap because we all know how much we pay on state and local taxes, especially here in California. There were some good business tax incentives, expensing for research and development, qualified business investment development, QBID as it's known, bonus depreciation, some family leave, and some child care leave tax credits as well. But unfortunately, when you look at it as a whole, to sum it up, the tax provisions really leaned towards the top. I'm not just saying that. The nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office basically did an analysis, and it said that if someone was making $1 million, they would get under this bill $100,000 a year in tax breaks. That's $250 a day. However, if you're a family earning less than $50,000, you'd get $250 in tax breaks a year. That's 68 cents a day. Now, one of the things that I'm most worried about, though, in this bill, and which I call the ugly parts of it, is how it really kind of limits health care and the potential for there to be significant cuts, especially under this provision called Medicaid, which basically is for disabled, low-income people. And look, I think some of you are looking at me going, well, look, I don't care about Medicaid, I care about Medicare. I get it, and I'm going to talk about that later. But I want to kind of talk about how that will have effect on the overall healthcare system. Now, there's three things that it did to cut back on Medicaid. It limits federal contributions to state Medicaid programs. It restricts state-directed payments for Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act. And there is this implementation of work and reporting requirements. Now, don't get me wrong. Work requirements for those who can work, I believe, are okay. I do believe that work is dignity, and that's fine. However, the problem that we've seen with work requirements for states' Medicaid systems is that they're either very, very expensive or they just don't work. Because if you look at the three states that tried to implement them, the example and the evidence is right there. Arkansas tried this in 2018 to 2019. And what the analysis said is that 18,000 people inadvertently got kicked off Medicaid because they couldn't keep up with the reporting requirements. It got so bad that a federal judge had to stop the program after 1 year. In Michigan, they implemented work requirements. It cost them over $100 million to do in 1 year. In Georgia, they tried to do it. It cost $90 million. $65 million of that $90 million just went to the implementing of the program. So it just hasn't worked at the state level, There's a reason why the federal level doesn't have it, and so it makes it very, very difficult to implement. And then even if you're targeting the able-bodied adults that could work, which is a very, very small percentage, it's going to have effects on other people on Medicaid. And look, I get the vision that the majority party tried to say that it's about the 30-year-old who's sitting in his mom's basement playing video games. Got it, okay? Yeah, that person should be working. But you didn't hear them talk about the 2/3 of seniors in nursing homes that are on Medicaid, the 1 in 10 veterans who are using Medicaid, didn't talk about the disabled that are on Medicaid. And so these types of provisions will, I believe, based on the evidence, cause people to get kicked off Medicaid. The CBO, once again, nonpartisan, did an analysis of those provisions and said that it will cause 11.8 million to be kicked off Medicaid by 2034. Additionally, those provisions, be it the lack of people using Medicaid or the lack of reimbursement from the federal government for Medicaid, is really going to hurt our hospitals, rural hospitals especially, that rely on Medicaid. And it could cause a number of those hospitals to shut down. And what happens then, guess where those patients are going to go? To urban hospitals, to San Jose hospitals, to those hospitals. And therefore, it's going to make healthcare more expensive in that sense. That's one of the reasons, one of the main reasons why I was voted against it. But also, ladies and gentlemen, one of the things that we have failed to talk about, both sides have failed to talk about, is our debt and deficit. Right now, our debt and deficit is $36 trillion. $36 trillion. 2 years ago, the Wharton School of Business at University of Pennsylvania did an analysis of our economy and did a bunch of long-term models. Each of those models demonstrated a crashing economy unless we took steps to reduce the debt. The problem is the reconciliation law does the exact opposite, in that it will add $3.8 trillion to our debt over the next 10 years. The problem with debt is that as our debt grows and interest rates will remain high, that will crowd out private investment. That will prevent government investment. And that will mean that we're going to have to, because we're going to have to pay more on the interest to pay off our debt rather than on investment in anything in the United States. And we've already started down that path. We pay more per year to service our national debt than we do per year into Medicaid, into Medicare, and in our defense budget. We pay more to paying down our debt than what we do for our defense budget per year. The only area that we don't pay more to is Social Security. So obviously the near-term issues it's going to create are highest interest rates, highest mortgage rates, higher inflation, and ultimately that means it's going to create long-term issues with fiscal costs from the huge bill without any revenue to pay for it, with the uncertainty of these tariffs that are affecting many businesses, including small businesses right here in South San Jose, and all of which are going to lead to a gradual decline of our economy. That will mean that we will have to take extreme measures if it gets to that point. That will mean higher taxes without the benefits of government. That will mean, as I like to say, European taxes without European benefits. But we have to do something. And I'll get to that in a little bit, how we can do it. Now, unfortunately, this reconciliation law is going to define our fiscal policy over the next decade. The CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, estimates that the law will transfer wealth from the bottom 10% of income to the top 10% of income in our nation. It will really shrink the middle working class. Instead, I firmly believe that that's who we should be focusing on. Working families, people who live here, people who come here, people who work hard, people who play by the rules. I believe the government should be focused on them and do everything possible to give them opportunities to give their family a better life. You do that by getting back to governing. You do that by staying in Congress and legislating. I mean, I'll admit to you, I was dumbfounded when I heard Kamala Harris talk about the reasons why she was not getting back or not running for governor. And that she said, well, the system's just too broken now. Damn it, we need people to get into politics when the system's broken. We don't need them to get into it when it's not. We need people to step up and lean into this stuff, especially now. We do that by trusting our economic data and not firing the messenger if you don't like the data. I mean, if you fire a person for bad data, how in the future are you going to trust that office when it issues good data? So it's going to be tough. We know that. It's tough to think about what's going on right now. It's tough about what's going on at the top. It's tough, but I can tell you that despite the politics, despite the personalities, it doesn't affect my values. I try not to let it affect the way I govern. Now, this fall, going into this period in which we're going to be having difficult conversations about getting a budget for the United States government, when there's going to be issues, as we heard today, about redistricting throughout the United States of America, not just in California, how are we going to get stuff done? I firmly believe there are areas that we can work on together. I do. We can address our debt and deficit. I think the question we have to ask ourselves before we do it, or at least to motivate people to start talking about this, is how much longer can the greatest debtor in the world continue to call itself the greatest country in the world? We can answer that question by doing a fiscal commission. I'm sorry, in Washington, D.C., debt is literally and figuratively a four-letter word. Nobody wants to say it. Nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody has the political will to do anything about it. One of these things, unfortunately, was these tough issues where we govern by crisis rather than governing by leadership. And unfortunately, we need a law to get people to govern when it comes to reduce our debt and deficit. I believe one of the ways you can do that is with a fiscal commission. A fiscal commission entails Democrats and Republicans being forced to come to the table and talk about everything on the table, be it cuts in spending or higher revenues. But you got to talk about it and then come up with a plan to do something about it. And then third and foremost, make sure members of Congress have to vote on it. Don't let them shirk their responsibilities. Now, I'm on the Budget Committee, as you heard. I was one of 3 Democrats to vote for a fiscal commission out of the Budget Committee. I got the crap kicked out of me by my left. They thought it was going to destroy Social Security, and my response to that was, if we don't do anything right now, if we don't do anything on our debt, if we don't do anything on our Social Security, that trust fund will run dry and go bankrupt in 2034. So this is a way we can at least start talking about that and shoring up the foundation of those instrumental and important benefits. So I think a fiscal commission is something we are talking about it, and I can tell you that there are Democrats and Republicans, and I'm a part of this group, that are actually talking about how we can get back to the table to deal with our debt and deficit. The number one issue in California's 19th Congressional District is affordable housing, or I should say the lack of affordable housing. Being on the Ways and Means Committee, what I've come to realize, since we, in my humble opinion, are the most powerful committee in Congress, we have purview over the tax code. So guess what? I believe we can use the tax code not to penalize people, but incentivize people, especially when it comes to affordable housing. Affordable housing never used to be a federal issue, always kind of a local issue. But now I believe it's an all-hands-on-deck issue. And I can tell you it's not just a coastal issue anymore. This really is an issue that's affecting all of the United States of America. I tell you, based on the bipartisanship that I'm seeing when it comes to housing issues, I'm seeing when it comes to my bills on affordable housing. I got a couple bills that I'm going to be pushing forward this coming fall and into the next year in the 119th Congress. Number one is this bill called More Homes on the Market. Let me tell you what this does. You guys know the situation, and some of you may be in this situation, that you had your home, you've owned your home since 70s, 80s, 90s, even early 2000s. You know that you might have grown out of your home. Kids have left. Fortunately, it's too expensive for them to come back. And so you're kind of figuring out, what am I going to do? This house is too big. I've grown out of it. I want to sell my home. You know as well as I do, The price of that home has increased, and therefore what's going to happen when you sell your home? Getting hammered on taxes. Hammered on taxes. Now, there is a law that was created back in 1996 that says there's a capital gains exemption, an exemption on those gains that you're getting. But it's only $250,000 if you're a single filer, $500,000 if you're a joint filer. You know as well as I do that that's not enough to protect your nest egg, that you've invested a lot in your home. I wrote a simple bill. I know, I gotta be honest with you. It was about coming up here and talking to people in South San Jose when I was first running for the new 19th Congressional District. They were telling me about this. And I said, well, let's just increase the tax exemptions. So I wrote a bill with Republican Mike Kelly from Pennsylvania, basically doubles those numbers, makes it $500,000 and $1 million. That's it. People deserve to have incentives to be able to sell their homes and protect that nest egg. That's what my bill does. Middle income housing tax credit. Look, I'm all for LIHTC, low income housing tax credit. It's very, very important to have housing for people who qualify for low income housing. The problem is, especially in my congressional district, if you can imagine, there are people who need housing, but they don't qualify for low income housing. They make too much. They work here, but they can't live here. So where's the workforce housing? So I wrote a bill, bipartisan bill with Mike Carey from Ohio, to basically incentivize workforce housing, the development of it. Give those tax credits to the developers who are willing to build middle income housing. And then the first-time home buyers tax credit. When my wife and I bought our first home, we got that $10,000 from the federal government for buying our first home. That went away in 2006. I want to bring it back and make it $15,000. These are some of the commonsensical bipartisan bills that we can put forward and should pass to address the #1 issue in the 19th Congressional District, affordable housing. Medicare reimbursement rates. Look, in the 19th Congressional District, you would think that doctors would yearn to come and practice here. And they think they do. And they actually come into it. But they're here for about a year. And trust me, I'm talking to some of our hospitals. They're giving them incentives. Down at Community Hospital of Monterey Peninsula, Steve Packer, the former CEO, he was giving people houses, doctors' houses to come and stay here. And the doctors would accept it, but after a year, they'd give back the keys and say, it's not worth it for me. And one of the main drivers of that is Medicare is not reimbursing these doctors enough. Medicare rates have not kept up with inflation. And so I wrote a bipartisan bill with Dr. Greg Murphy from North Carolina. Basically says it offsets the planned 2.8% cut, but it also increases reimbursements for Medicare by 50%. Okay? A very reasonable solution to these types of things that we've been kind of continuing to push forward. Immigration reform. Look, I'm all for targeting gang members and felons. I'm a former prosecutor, as you heard. I was on the drug team up in Oakland. I was on the gang team down in Monterey and Salinas. I get it, okay? However, fortunately, this administration's deportation policy is getting too wide. And it's basically sweeping up men and women who are here doing jobs that no Americans will do. Obviously, like I said, we have a lot of agriculture in our district. We have people who are willing to come here and do those types of back-breaking jobs that no American will do no matter how much you pay them. And look at our nursing homes. Look at our healthcare industry. Look at our hospitality industry. There are people who are doing those jobs that you know as well as I do are here in an undocumented status. My attitude is that, and what we've seen in our economy, the attitude of our economy and many of our communities is if they're willing to come here, willing to work here, willing to play by the rules here, we should at least afford them an opportunity to stay here and continue to contribute. I firmly believe that. Obviously, the ones who play by the rules, like I said, and that's immigration reform. And I do believe that if there is an opportunity to pass immigration reform, it can come from this president. Despite the rhetoric that Donald Trump espouses about immigration, mainly to get elected, I get it. Man, the border numbers are going down. He needs to declare a victory on the border, especially not just with those numbers going down, but the large amounts of money that are then going back into our border through the OBBB. $150 billion for deportation policy. A large amount of that should go to the border to secure it even more. Don't get me wrong. But declare a victory on that, that gives then Republican members coverage to actually do something on immigration reform, to actually make sure that those people who are willing to come here, contribute here, can actually stay here. The issue for Democrats is whether or not that's going to be a citizenship or just a legalization, to kind of get in the weeds a little bit here, guys, what that means. And so that's going to be the issue going forward, a pathway to citizenship or a pathway to legalization. Look, I know as well as some of you do, that many of the people who do come here, it's not that their goal is to be a citizen. Their goal is to work here, make money, give themselves and their children a better life. And if that means foregoing citizenship, what I've talked to is many people are willing to do that, as long as they can stay here and contributing to build that foundation for that future for them and their family. And so I believe that's something we should seriously consider. And again, I'm on part of a bipartisan group that's actually having serious conversations about that. Trade. Look, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3 of the Constitution gives the Congress the authority, the purview over trade. That's our purview. Unfortunately, for decades, you have Congress members who are unwilling to make the tough choices, and they've given that authority up to the executive branch. And so you have an executive branch that has completely usurped any congressional authority, any constitutional authority, and then you have an executive branch who's then making these types of decisions on trade and tariffs that's creating a tremendous amount of uncertainty in our economy. So first and foremost, I believe Congress needs to take back its power when it comes to trade. I'm on the Trade Subcommittee, on the Ways and Means Committee, and I believe we actually have to start doing something and passing deals. Now look, the last administration did no such thing. The Biden administration gave us frameworks. It did not give us deals. And to me, having a framework about trade is like having a hamburger without the meat. There's no substance there. There's no details there. That's what leads to an executive branch that then is allowed to have these types of tariffs. But if you have deals, that's how you get rid of tariffs. And so I'll give the president credit on trade in that people in Washington, D.C. are actually then talking about trade. We should be talking about trade, but trade deals are tough. Trade deals means getting at the table with your counterparts and actually working out and hashing out the details. Don't give us frameworks. Give us deals and give it to Congress to have purview to authorize it. We did this with the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA. We did that with that. It was one of the gold standard of a trade agreement with Canada and Mexico, the gold standard of it. And we're going to have a review of that coming up in 2026. I believe that's a start of Congress to take that back. Look, trade is a tool of diplomacy that bridges countries economically. Tariffs can destroy those relationships that will take years or decades to mend. That's why Congress, representatives of the people, should have more say in the gravity of such decisions. Look, as you can tell, I believe in the institution of Congress. And I can tell you this, and I've had some pretty good jobs, be it as a prosecutor in Oakland. You can imagine a Carmel Valley kid going into Oakland, California as a prosecutor. Eye-opening experience, but a great job in a great office at that time. It was a great job. I liked representing the people down in Monterey as well. I look at my time in the Navy, serving in Afghanistan, as a most invaluable experience I think I could ever have. Mind you, when I look at the military, I analogize it to my children. You only think of the good times until you start talking to somebody who's in the military and you realize there's a lot of BS that you have to deal with. But I still look at it like that was my time. Nobody will ever take that opportunity that I had in Afghanistan away from me. I've had some good jobs. This is the best job I've ever had as a United States representative. I cannot stress that enough. Despite everything that's going on, despite the division, the dysfunction, it is the best job I've ever had because you can serve the people of the place that I've always called home. It's a way, I'm telling you this, it's a way to restore people's faith in government, something that's really lacking right now, which I get. But I'm telling you, if you can help them and make the federal government work for them, that at least gives them a reminder of why the federal government is there for them. And let me tell you, it's amazing some of the people I work with in Congress, Democrats and Republicans, people who are there for the right reasons, who understand what it means to serve their constituents and not just get on TV and not just yell and scream. Those aren't the ones Yeah, there's plenty of them. I can name more than one. Yeah, yeah, there's plenty of them. And so, but you got to know, please know this, that there are so many of us that are kind of right here, not here, not here, but right here that aren't on TV, that aren't yelling and screaming, that are actually at the table working together. And to me, my best friends in the United States Congress are Republicans. I really love these guys and gals. I trust them, and that's the key. I trust them. And so I value myself as a bipartisan member, and that I've always said I will work with anybody as long as it furthers the values of the people of the 19th Congressional District. But at the same time, absolutely, I'm going to fight anybody who threatens the values and the people of the 19th Congressional District. That's right. Now, look, there are a number of people in my district who just want me to yell and scream, especially right now. It's a very emotional time. I get that sentiment. There's a lot to yell about. But what I've seen is that constituents would rather have a results-oriented member of Congress that serves them. That they want to live their lives and know that when they need the federal government, they can rely on someone to help them make the federal government work for them. I think that's why I've continued to be in this position, why the people of the 19th and previously the 20th Congressional District have elected me. There's a score, if you can imagine this, there's a score done by the Lugar School of Public Policy out of the Georgetown University that determines the bipartisanship of members of Congress. All 535 of us, 435 in the House, 100 in the Senate. My ranking last Congress was number 13 overall, number 6 Democrat, number 1 member of Congress in California. I also believe that that's why I was the number 1 overperforming Democrat in last year's election, according to the bookballot.com. Basically, what that means is that in the 19th Congressional District, I had more Democrats and more Republicans vote for me than any other Democrat did in their congressional district. Because I firmly believe that it's about serving not Democrats, not Republicans, it's about serving people. I cannot stress that enough. And let me tell you, of course it's getting tough to do. Of course it's tough. But you know what? When you look at the history of our country, that is what our country is about. I get that we like to look back and we like to think about the good times. I get that. We kind of have this, I call it this narcotic of nostalgia, okay? But when you look at the history of this country, it's the tough times that are the rule, not the exception. And it's what we do during those tough times that have made this the greatest country of all time. And that's what we have to continue to remind ourselves of, is that no matter the challenge is, it's what we do during those challenges that will to make the tough decisions to soldier on. And in order to do that, you need one thing. You need a thing that I also heard growing up, fable I heard, about a priest and a rabbi who want to get to know each other a little bit better. So they go to a boxing match. And it was right before the match, right before the bell rings, one of the boxers makes the sign of the cross. The rabbi turns to the priest and nudges him and says, "What the hell does that mean anyway?" And the priest says, "Not a damn thing if he can't fight." Lady and gentlemen, we can bless ourselves all we want as a country, as a community. But if you don't have that will to fight, then you know you're just going to continue to be angry. And so I think what we've seen throughout the history of the United States, I think what I've seen, my family, I think what I've seen in our community is that we have the will to fight. That's what it's going to take. Because the more we fight, that's how we give our future, not just to our democracy, but to our children. Well, I look forward to doing it. Thank you. However you want to do it. However you want to do it, yeah. I'll let you call, Mike, if you want to call on the people.
I really believe that we need the immigrant for the workforce. Give you some statistics. It takes to replace our population 2.1 births per woman. Right now, we're at 1.6. That means our population is declining. If we don't get good immigration reform to replace those people, we're going to be in a world of hurt as a country.
I did my 21st town hall this week, Monday, over at the Alameda Community Association. This is the second time someone brought this up about the declining population. And I think that's right. And I think in the meantime, before we deal with our demographics, however we deal with that, that's above my pay grade and dealing with that stuff. I do believe that we have to make up for it through proper immigration reform. I completely agree with you. And I say that based on where I come from, having grown up in Carmel Valley on the Central Coast, but also, having the Italian immigrant family that I came from. My grandfather was an Italian immigrant that came here back in 1921 on the ship called the Providence, came right through Ellis Island, signed the ledger. He had $5 to his name, and his occupation was a peasant. That's what he was described as. Made his way across that area and ended up in Monterey, thank God, and where he raised my father and my uncle, and the same house he built where myself and my two older brothers were raised. And so, we always asked him, my dad always made it a point to ask him, why did you come here? Why'd you take the risk to leave the known to the for the unknown? And it was always the same response: to give his children a better life. And to me, that's the American dream. And I still think people want to come to this country because we can provide that opportunity. Now, obviously, there's got to be a vetting. There's got to be it's got to be done the right way, and we got to ensure that it's done properly and orderly and securely. Absolutely. But I also realize we got to give those people an opportunity who are willing to come here and play by the rules the chance to stay here. I agree with you. Absolutely. Absolutely.
I have a question here. This concerns Social Security.
Give him the mic. Say it again.
Oh, sure. On Social Security, it's always been mentioned for a long time that the pot is running dry by 1935 or something.
That's right.
Why is it that this plateau, I guess you call it, of this people making over 150,000 or whatever that number is, no longer pay into Social Security? Here, the higher wage earners are paying less percentage-wise than those making less. That's really unfair.
And I think, look, this is one of the commonsensical solutions that we at least have to have the political will to start talking about. I completely agree with you, and that there are certain solutions that are out there, like taking that cap off, where when you stop contributing, that's something that has to be done. But you're spot on. Come 2034, I think they're saying now, the trust fund's going to run dry, and people are going to get screwed, and we need to do everything we can to prevent that. And so it starts with having conversations about it. John Larson is a member from Connecticut who's a big Social Security advocate, and he's on the Ways and Means Committee with him. That's part of the solution that he has. Ideally, it's basically talking about an overall picture, though, because if we're going to do that, we also have to talk about how we pay for it as well, not just through them, but other ways to shore up the Social Security Trust Fund. And so it's kind of a larger conversation that we need to have. That's why I'm a firm believer in a fiscal debt commission, because I think Social Security will be a part of it. There will be an understanding that we have to shore it up, but we also got to talk about how we pay for it as well. Thank you. Sir?
Question. Thank you for being here first.
Yes, sir.
I really appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Being a part of the Budget Committee, I also would like to have your perspective on the DOGE activity that the government is doing, because it affects a lot of people. Basically, things to get done now seem to be extremes in all directions. What is the Budget Committee, and what are your feelings on how to better use a more mellow way of handling government? Because neither side seems to want to do that. It's one way or the other.
Appreciate that question. I think, look, I think there's a reason why Elon Musk is no longer a special advisor or whatever he was to the president. I think there's a reason, amongst many, as to why we're not hearing a lot about Doge and the extreme cuts, but unfortunately, they're still happening. So look, I get that we need to tackle waste, fraud, and abuse. Absolutely. But you do it in a targeted fashion. You do it in a way, and just like Clinton and Gore did back in the 90s, in which they did do that, but they did it in a focused fashion. You come in there and do this broad swath of cuts, you are hurting people's lives tremendously and cutting off services, including call times that are going up because they're cutting back on call center people to answer the phone to help you out at a minimum. The employees of the federal government that are getting layoffs, hurting services, the NIH research that's being done for medical care. This is something that I think we have to be very mindful of and continue to push back. In fact, I had somebody, an outside lobbyist, who was talking to the White House. Not the president, nothing in the circle, but obviously people who were familiar with these types of cuts. And the White House's response to this group's pushback on Doge was, well, look, we're going to cut everything that we can, and you're going to have to convince us why we should keep it, and then we'll put it back. That really is their thinking right now. Now, there are a number of ways to push back on this. Being in the minority, it's very, very difficult. With a majority that's sort of obsequious to this president and does anything he wants, it makes it very, very difficult for Congress to have any sort of foundation to push back. That's why you're seeing litigation, a number of pieces of litigation, and the courts having to be the bulwark to these types of decisions, these types of executive orders that are really having an overarching negative effect. And so for now, we're having to rely on the courts and litigation, unfortunately, because we don't have a majority in Congress to stand up. Now, we're speaking out. Obviously, we're writing letters. We're pressing the administration. And in fact, I'm actually working with Republicans when I see these types of cuts affect Republican districts and my district, and the similarities. I go to that Republican, I say, let's do a letter together to push back on the administration to show them how damaging this overarching cut is. And we've actually had a little bit of success right there, once again, convincing the White House not to do these types of cuts. So once again, I disagree with the way it's being done in the overall kind of sweep of cuts. I'm against waste, fraud, and abuse, but it's got to be targeted to address it. I wish they would do it that way as well.
Yes. Is there any reason to believe that we will resolve all the issues or any of the issues with homelessness?
Yeah. Well, look, I heard recently that you had Mayor Mahan in here. I believe he is a champion on this issue. I do, despite the fact that some disagree with him. I think when it comes to the Fed, where we can help out, where I can help out Matt and the city of San Jose and the county of San Jose, is the last thing you want here is the federal government telling you how to deal with homelessness. It's the last thing that we want to do. It's the last thing you'd want from the federal government. However, I do believe that the way the federal government can play their part is working with the city and county. They're the ones who determine what type of programs actually work. You, the locals on the ground, you know which ones work and what don't work. Then you come to the federal government and we use the power of the purse to help you pay for it. And so there are a number of federal programs that actually assist with San Jose's programs and help out Matt and his efforts and even the county's efforts to make sure that homelessness are dealt with in the way that's appropriate for this area. That's not my expertise on homelessness, but I am, like you said, part of the Budget and Ways and Means Committee. Therefore, I need to make sure that those, HUD-VASH vouchers, home program, continuum of care programs, those federally funded programs that are actually working here on the ground stay funded accordingly. So that's the federal angle. To your overarching question of, how we deal with homelessness, and is there a solution? Is there a silver bullet? Absolutely not. We know that. There is no silver bullet for homelessness because it's so, there's so many facets to it. Fortunately, I think, we're trying to address it as best as we can, but I also think we in the federal government have to do a better job making sure that the programs we're funding are actually working. And that depends on communication. And like I said, I feel that I'm not just a colleague with Mayor Mahan. I feel I'm a friend with him. I have a cell phone. He has my cell phone. And so we're more than happy to have those types of conversations to basically see what works and what doesn't work, what should be funded and what shouldn't be funded. And I'll continue to play my part in that role.
Okay, we're going to leave it there. Congressman Panetta, thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
We want to have you back sometime. We'll all be here.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Look forward
Come
to
back in a couple of years. We're all going to be here.
Yeah,
So
what-
thank you
what-
very
and
much.
I appreciate what-
And
what-
we'll get to the questions we left not asked.
One of the reasons why I'm taking off, what I like to do here in San Jose, I do office hours. If you're in my district, hopefully, you signed up for my newsletter, you'll get these emails saying, hey, I'm going to be at Evergreen Library for 2.5 hours. Please sign up and come meet me for 10 minutes and tell me your issues. Tell me what I should be knowing. Tell me how you can, how I can help you. So that's one of the things I like to do here in San Jose. I think I found it to be the best way to get into the communities. And so if you're in my district, please know that I do those. Ian, if you ever want to meet, please call Alyssa, call my office, and happy to have you come by and have a meeting with you. I meet with everybody that wants to have a meeting. I get along with Zoe, I get along with Sam, I get along with Ro. One of the things about the previous redistricting was that it really cut up San Jose. Like I said, my district's not a San Jose district, but I can tell you, San Jose now has 4 members of Congress representing it. So I'm serious. So it's actually like we have more power here in San Jose in Congress than it was if you just had 1 member. Because look, if Zoe comes to me on an issue, or I go to Zoe, or I go to Ro, or Ro comes to me, or I go to Sam, or Sam comes to me, it's not just 1 for 1. It's 4 to 4. We all get on board and we all support each other. So it's actually a good thing. And yeah, we have a good relationship. Thank you, everybody.